Welcome to the last preparatory webinars to the workshop for the establishment of an harmonized diagnostic framework to assess the interaction between cetacean and fishing activities. This within the Life Delphi project. Our last webinar will be focused on a review of the existing literature in trying to summarize the common evidences that has been reported in order to diagnose the interaction with fishing activities, and all the papers that are here mentioned and summarized can be found in the Google Drive for a further reading from on yourself, in your time. Just to summarize what said elsewhere, the possible interaction between cetaceans and fishing activities will be can be listed as bycatches, which is an unintentional catching of cetaceans in fishing gears. Entanglement, when the animal is totally wrapped or partially wrapped on fishing gears. Gears ingestions or larynx entanglement, which happens in some areas directly killing from fishermen, and prey depletion. In this case, regarding prey depletion, it's very difficult from our point of view, from the necropsy point of view, to assess any of this kind of interaction, except for the nutritional condition code of the animal. But this is really, really difficult to assess. So we will focus on the first 4 steps, the first 4 issues before, in order to establish and implement a common diagnostic framework. So obviously most of the studies has been done on the bycatch and unintentional catching of cetaceans in fishing gears, since most of the literature came from the Atlantic Ocean, in particular from the UK and from the US. And so there are some specific features that it's very difficult to find in the Mediterranean Sea, but we can have and we can take some of these evidences in order to implement our common diagnostic framework based on our experience and skills. So at the very beginning, the bycatch was established just on external examinations, findings, so laceration, marks on nets, and so on. And but usually finding an animal in a net is not enough to diagnose it bycatch, because it could be a secondary cause, and it's true also the opposite. So it's important to perform and complete throughout necropsies, not forgetting ancillary analysis in order to exclude any possible other cause of death. In regard to the main gross findings, we have 4 different steps for bycatch. The first one is to investigate which are the injuries related to the interaction with directly and indirectly with the fishing gears, evidence of the mechanism, so asphyxia, not drowning, and evidence of recent feedings which support the idea of a healthy animal, and the absence of concomitant or predisposing disease, or condition, which obviously ask, or it is possible. All this is possible just with a complete necropsy. In 2013, Michael Moore and colleagues published a sort of resume coming from the results of a workshop aimed to collect these gross and histopathological evidences. I would like to stress the fact that they identify 3 different score of confidence. So a confirmed case of bycatch, a probable case of bycatch, and suspect case of bycatch, based on the kind of evidences, of post-mortem evidences. So first of all, if you want to have a confirmed case of bycatch, you should have a very fresh animal, code 1 to code 3. And then obviously if some observer on board is present, you can confirm the bycatch for sure. The presence of entangling in the gear give you a strong evidences of bycatch as well, while many other findings give you an idea of a probable cause of a probable interaction with fishing activities. So it's important, in my opinion, to adopt this score of confidence in order to be more stick to the evidences. So besides this scoring, which can be used in the final diagnosis, the gross evidences are most related. The first gross evidences are those related to the interaction with the fishing gears. So the marks, the lacerations, the presence obviously of the gear, but also tail abrasion, the lacking of extremities when a fisherman tried to disentangle the animal, trying to preserve also the gear. Some injuries due to the direct interaction, but also the incision and deep ones due to the sharp objects. This is an example, just to show you a very recent example. Occurred in Liguria, and where the CREDIMA, the National Reference Center, act supported by us, UniPD, where you can see the fishing gear, and then in this case the fisherman took the carcass to the port, so the fishing gear and the tail abrasion related to the interaction with the fishing gears itself. This is a probable cause, a suspect cause when you can see the linear incision due to a knife or sharp object. The animal is badly preserved, but we have some evidences so we have an idea of a suspect of bycatch. Then we have other not immediately related evidence to due to hemorrhages, due to other findings like blunt traumas, subcutaneous hemorrhage and petechial, lines and nets, skull fracture, and visceral hemorrhages. And in this recent paper coming from the Bernardo Quiros from Yara of the Canary Islands and Woods Hole, you can see that there are many other findings that we are not used to observe like multi-organ congestion, the bulging red eyes, and the multi-organ gas bubbles. Regarding gas bubbles, since bubbles, gas, it's also a common finding post-mortem evidences in post-mortem changes. It's important to recognize them, so I have put some papers on how to recognize, how to score gas bubble, and where they should be to be supportive of suggestive of a possible interaction with fisheries. So not just bubble in the mesenteric, for instance, but also perirenal, like in this case. The animal is quite a code 3-4, so this is a suspect of bycatch. But in this case, which is the previous one, very fresh, you can see here some gas, subcapsular gas around the kidney. So it's important not only performing properly the necropsy, but also taking pictures properly of these findings in order to support our common findings. So I would like to ask you all to collect this information in the next years, working together, so we can have a more precise, more detailed pictures. In this case, I had to take from a general picture of the abdominal cavities. Even more recent papers detail some other findings, like the rectus abdominis separation, so here in the middle of the belly, and some hernial findings, which are typically being associated to underwater, peracute underwater entrapment, while many other findings like hemorrhages are common to other conditions, other diseases and pathological changes. So they are not so suggestive. It's important to couple these findings to other which are not so not associated to other pathology and other disease. So in building diagnostic framework, we have to mix all these findings, gross findings, but also histopathological findings. We are used to detect pulmonary edema just grossly, but it's important to confirm that also the type of edema, also histologically, which means finding, for instance, a pinkish, protein-rich fluid with macrophages in the lungs, and eventually, if an accidental opening of the blowhole is occurring, some external finding, external foreign bodies, which is very can occur in the last phase, in the very last minutes before death. During the entrapment, the animal usually becomes very stressed. So there could be some not only hemorrhages related to trauma, blunt traumas, but also related to the stressful condition. And so examining muscles, epiaxial muscles, but also hypoaxial as well as the rectus abdominis, it's important, and it's important findings. And as you can see here, histology should be performed in order to assess the degeneration of the muscles, as well as to assess possible evidences of capture myopathy, like the depletion of myoglobin, and then the presence of fibrinogen within the muscular fibers. In the last 2 years, along with our colleagues from the zooprophylactic of Emilia-Romagna, we tried to implement or to use the diatom test, which is used in drowning in human beings, forensic for assessed drowning, also in sea turtles as well in bottlenose dolphins. What we discussed with our colleagues in international sessions is that maybe the findings diatoms within the long bones of bottlenose dolphins is not really a good evidence, because they are not used to open the blowhole involuntarily for hypercapnic condition. So it's important, and so diatoms can enter also during life in swimmers and other swimming animals, so marine vertebrates. So it's not to date, it's not really a strong evidence can be used in our detection. But it's important to know that, and so it's important also the negative data. The other two relevant findings, besides the gross and histopathological findings, is dietary condition, so the nutritional condition code, as well as the evidences of recent feeding, which can suggest a good health condition, as well as by collecting this, we can compare if the fish found in the stomach is comparable with the prey in the fishing gear. And finally, as already stated, we have to exclude any other cause of death or predisposing factor through a complete necropsy. The fishing interaction is not limited to the bycatch, so incidental or unintentional catching, but also incidental killing. Sometimes they kill these animals. This is in Venice, and we found these bullets within the body of the animal. But this is from Sardinia, again, some bullets from 1 meter distance. So in this case, we have to apply the normal forensic protocol used for firearms that we use generally we use for wildlife or for dogs. So it's important to apply that kind of protocol. There are other kind of fishing interaction. On the right, you can see some images taken by Blue World Institute webpage and during the NetSat project. But on the left, there are some other kind of fishing interaction. Maybe the animal was incidentally captured, but then they used the carcass for fishing activities. So these two, the last category, which is the direct killing, or is an interaction, at least in Italy, is considered penal, so which means that you can go to jail in this case. Entanglement is another option, and I think that you remember all the definition included in webinar 3. So entanglement, in this case, you can see Furia. Furia is a sperm whale in the Aeolian Island where the Coast Guard tried to disentangle the animal unsuccessfully. So this animal can die, maybe could die for long-term starvation, because this gear can impair the diving, the feeding, and the swimming activities. So the animal could die for a long time, or, as in this case, can determine some injuries. So large whales usually die for long-term poor nutritional condition. And this is something that we can think about, how to diagnose nutritional condition. As in the case of bottlenose dolphins from the Adriatic, from the Ligurian Sea, and from Sardinia, mainly in Italy, but also in Croatia, where the interaction with fishery is documented by bottlenose dolphins going to the trammel nets, taking some prey, and they remain, fragments of nets remains around the mouth, or they are ingested, and we have the larynx entanglement for the first time documented in Croatia, but now we have the same cases in Italy, mainly central Italy, but also now in the northern part, and named as larynx entanglement, but also the complete ingestion. So finding nets in the stomach is obviously one of the evidence that they can how to say for which the final diagnosis is of confirmed fisher interaction. In this case, regarding the fishing gear ingestion, and this is the last episode, the last example, we can use a diagnostic framework that have been used already, or decided already between in the last international workshop organized by the IWCA and ACOBAMS regarding the ingestion of marine litter, which is mainly based on the nutritional condition parameters. And this is the example of a framework, of a diagnostic framework. There was also in webinar 4 we showed this table. This table, as you can see here, is support your diagnosis to evaluate the foreign body as an incidental finding, a possible contribution to death, and the probable cause of death, depending on the postmortem findings. But obviously, this framework, and this is my last take-home message, is not a shortcut to facilitate our diagnosis, but it is a way to harmonize and our interpretation. And so a complete necropsy is always needed, including histopathology, including all the other complementary analysis. This is just a guideline how to interpret our findings, and based on not only on the findings of the plastic gear or the plastic bags or the fishing gear, but also using the post-mortem changes macroscopically and histopathology. With this last slide, we have finished these 5 webinars that are functional to guide you towards the good discussion on the 9th September. Please try to have a look to the drive and the documents including the drive in order to be more prepared, and try to think to your cases if there are cases fitting to this example and the literature. Thank you for your attention, and see you on September 9th.